As we're here on the Sports Report, the number one global sports show with our number one analyst around for all the latest happenings in the world of sports. And he's one of the greatest players in SJC Long Island Golden Eagles men's basketball history. And that 2018-19 season where he put it all together, where he was third in the Skyline Conference in block shots, 13th in rebounds. And in school history, he's near the top of the list all time in block shots, 25th in rebounds. He was an integral reason as to why our LI Brute won the 2020 ABA St. Louis Cardinals Division Championship, and now he's doing a phenomenal job now as a coach with the Level Up Basketball organization, which does so many great things on behalf of the communities on Long Island. And without further ado, here on the Sports Report, the number one global sports show, the Brute Force Brad Weiss. My friend, how are you?
Tom, I'm doing great. How are you?
Always good to speak with you, my friend, and we're getting closer to the 1 year anniversary. It's the 51st week that we've been together. Technically, it's the 51st episode. I don't know if we call them episodes anymore now that we're on Sportinarium, the number one global radio station, but it's been pretty much a year now since you and I started this thing, and obviously it's been a tremendous honor to be with you each and every week here on the show, and we've got to see you grow, my friend, in the person that you've become on and off the court. And listen, as we always say, Mike and the Mad Dog have nothing on us now. So Mike and the Mad Dog have left the stage. We've taken over, and we're actually heard now in 8 countries. So obviously, congratulations to you, my friend, on all your success. But as we spoke about on last week's show, the NBA All-Star Game came and went. And for a worldwide audience on Sportinarium listening, give us your take on this year's All-Star Game and the festivities as a whole.
Yeah, Tom. So speaking of success, I was pretty good last week with my predictions on who would win these contests and these MVPs in the All-Star Game. And I'll get to that here in a moment as we talk about the 2021 NBA All-Star Game that happened here in Atlanta, Georgia last weekend. Now, to start with the events here that happened at 6:30 in the evening, that was the NBA Skills Challenge and three-point shooting contest. The Skills Challenge winner was Domantas Sabonis, who was the runner-up last year from the Indiana Pacers. He had a great competition there, where he was almost unstoppable. He was making every single pass. The last round there, he missed a few shots, but overall, he was pretty damn good in that contest. The three-point shooting contest was quite an entertaining one, as Mike Conley gave it a good go, but Stephen Curry, arguably the best three-point shooter of all time, won yet another three-point shooting contest from the Golden State Warriors, and that was one I predicted, and I said guaranteed it was going to be him. I did get that right, even though it was a little scarier than I had thought, Tom Bryce. It was pretty close. The NBA dunk contest winner was Anthony Simons from the Portland Trail Blazers. Definitely an underwhelming dunk contest, Tom Bryce, as it wasn't really anything that we haven't seen before. But overall, Anthony Simons almost kissed the rim, and that was probably what got him the win in a very controversial contest, but at the same time, definitely you need some improvement there. In the All-Star Game itself, I had predicted that Team LeBron would win the game, and they certainly did, beating Team Durant 170 to 150. The All-Star Game MVP was Giannis Antetokounmpo, who, ladies and gentlemen, had 35 points on 16 for 16 shooting from the field. Yes, he did not miss one shot. And he actually shot 3 3-pointers. And people who know Giannis, Greek freak, is not really a three-point shooter, but he made 3 out of 3. So he was unbelievable. He's actually one of the best All-Star Game players in the history of the game when it comes to statistics. So he's a special talent. And 2 other special talents, Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, unfortunately, could not be in the All-Star Game due to contact tracing when the barber came out with COVID-19 that they had seen the day before. So disappointing news on that front. But overall, a very nice 2021 NBA All-Star Game that worked out well, and I'm excited for the second half of the season, Tom, coming up here in a matter of hours.
The Brute Force, there's a lot to be excited about, and I definitely think that a rising tide lifts all boats, in the fact that we were able to see an All-Star Game think about where we were a few months ago to where we are today, where everybody has some optimism. We're seeing a lot of things open up, and the fact that we were able to have an all-star game and as normal conditions as we possibly could, I think speaks volumes to the leadership of everybody involved in the NBA. So congratulations to everybody when it comes to the all-star game and the success that we were able to see. And maybe it wasn't what you hoped for in some of the festivities, but at the end of the day, the Brute Force, I'll still contend that it was a lot better than the alternative. And speaking of the second half here, there is a lot to be excited about when it comes to our New York Knicks and our Brooklyn Nets and the Brute Force. The Brooklyn Nets made another move that is going to shore up this already deep roster.
Yeah, Tom, they didn't really need much more insurance on their team, but they sure got a lot of it here. And the reason why they were able to pull this off is because Detroit Pistons forward Blake Griffin was bought out by the Pistons because the Pistons, who are the second worst team in the NBA, simply are just trying to rebuild, and Blake Griffin did not want to be a part of it. They mutually decided to break ways. They tried to trade him, but weren't able to, so they bought out his contract. And Griffin became an unrestricted free agent. And quickly, after some conversations with Kevin Durant and a couple of days of thinking, Blake Griffin decided to go to one of the best teams in the NBA, which is the Brooklyn Nets this year. Now, interestingly enough, Blake Griffin, who everybody knows as a guy who dunked over cars and was part of Lob City in Los Angeles with the Clippers. I actually remember being at a game about 7 years ago in Los Angeles, watching Blake Griffin dunk over people, has not made a dunk in a game in nearly a year. He has changed his game to more perimeter shooting, and his defense is still solid. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, he played with DeAndre Jordan in Los Angeles with the Clippers, who is now as a member of the Nets. And they're a pretty formidable defensive unit. So that is going to help the Nets. We'll see what Griffin does for them, whether he starts or he comes off the bench. But he's a guy who has definitely been an all-star before, a great player, and is going to make the Nets even better than they already were.
Obviously not the Blake Griffin of 5 or 6 years ago, where if you looked at his numbers, you could count on 20 plus points a game regularly and be the focal point of an offense. So then the Brute Force, what kind of Blake Griffin are we going to get for the Brooklyn Nets?
Yeah, Tom, I think you're going to get a Blake Griffin who probably is going to understand his role. And you're noticing like a guy like James Harden on the Nets, who was a guy, just like you said, who was a leading scorer, a guy who basically could do anything for them, but has played a role with the Nets where he's still scoring, but he's making plays for his teammates. He's doing much more than just scoring. He's actually improved on defense. So that's why he's an MVP candidate. I think a guy like Blake Griffin, on the other hand, is going to see a chance to win and understand that maybe scoring the most points per game or leading with statistics on the team is not going to be the priority anymore. It's going to be about him playing a role that the Nets need him to play to the best of his ability, whether it's starting or coming off the bench, and doing the best he can with it. You know, he's improved his perimeter shooting. That definitely has to persuade the Nets, a team that definitely shoots well from the outside. Griffin's a guy who's very strong. He could move around the paint. He could rebound, which is something that the Nets have struggled with. And defensively is where they've struggled. So he can help in a lot of different places, but he has to understand that he's going to a team that has 3 elite players already and has to play a role that the Nets need him to play if he's going to work with the Brooklyn Nets.
We're going to certainly see, and I think Net fans at the end of the day were looking for another move. They got that move. It remains to be seen on what kind of offense and what kind of player we're going to see when it comes to Blake Griffin. Again, at one time, he was arguably one of the top 15 or top 20 players in the entire NBA. And then as we get into here the second half of the season, and as crazy as it sounds, the Brute Force, we're only a couple of months here from the end of the season and the playoffs. What are a few other things you're watching for our worldwide audience here on Sportinarian?
Yeah, so there's a lot to be watching for. And as we get into the second half, there are going to be some interesting stories, Tom, Bryce. I'm going to go through each conference here very quickly to make sure that you guys understand what we're actually looking at in both conferences for our worldwide listeners. As we know, in the Eastern Conference, we just mentioned the Brooklyn Nets. They're in second place. The Philadelphia 76ers are currently leading the Eastern Conference, followed by the Milwaukee Bucks, the Boston Celtics. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, my New York Knicks, who are in the 5th seed right now at 19 and 18. And and the Miami Heat round out the top 6 at 18 and 18. Now, this year, of course, they are having extra playoff teams, as you will see 10 playoff teams, but 7 through 10 will have to play in a play-in tournament in order to get into the playoffs, which will be the top 8 seeds like it normally is. And those current 4 teams in the Eastern Conference are the Charlotte Hornets, Toronto Raptors, Chicago Bulls, and Indiana Pacers, who would currently play in that play-in tournament. But the Atlanta Hawks are only a half game behind the Pacers. The Washington Wizards are only a game and a half out. And the Cleveland Cavaliers, as crazy as it sounds, they are only 2.5 games back after they have really struggled. And even the Magic are right there at 3.5. So we'll see if they could creep into that conversation. Now, in the Western Conference, it's a little different, where you have Utah at 27-9 playing an elite basketball. The Phoenix Suns went all the way from the middle of the pack to the top in second at 24-11. The Lakers and Clippers are 3-4. The Portland Trailblazers and the Denver Nuggets round out the top 6. The teams in the play-in tournament would be the San Antonio Spurs at 18-14, having a tremendous season. Brandon Fitzpatrick's Dallas Mavericks are in 8th place at 18-16, have started to win some games. Golden State Warriors are in 9th, and they've been very good. And the Memphis Grizzlies are in 10th with 16-16. So those 4 teams would compete the top 8 spots. And you have teams like the Pelicans and Oklahoma City are both 3 games out, 6 games on the 500, and the Kings are 4 games out, while the Rockets and the Timberwolves, who have a very bad 7-29 record, are far, far away from any sort of playoff idea. So we'll see what happens, Tom Bryce. It's quite an interesting thing with the play-in tournament now, which will give teams that maybe wouldn't have made the playoffs in a normal year a chance to actually get into the playoffs by winning a couple games in a play-in tournament. So we'll continue to monitor that and the rest of the NBA standings as we continue to cover it here on the Sports Report.
Let me ask you this question very quickly, because you said something interesting, and I want to go back to, and I want to get your thoughts on it as somebody who played in the postseason in college at St. Joe's, who knows what it's like to get on a run and unexpectedly make the postseason. If you look at it right now, from 4th in the Eastern Conference, where the Celtics are, to, if you want to throw in as far as 13th with Cleveland, who is sitting 5 games out of 4th. They're sitting 5 games. And if you want to throw the Magic in there even for fun, who is 6 games back. So the Brute Force, if you go from 4 to 14, you're talking about a 6-game difference. If you go from 4 even to 11, which you mentioned at the top, when it comes to the Hawks, we're talking about a 3-game difference between seeds 4 and 11. I mean, right now, in your opinion, is that actually going to be the biggest story of the NBA? Just how all of these teams in the Eastern Conference are bunched up? I mean, an example of it is, let's say the Knicks. Well, the Knicks are in 5th on New York Knicks. Let's say the Knicks lose a couple of games in a row in the Brute Force. The Knicks could go from 5th to as far as 11th and out of that play-in tournament. I mean, how big of a story do you think this is going to be going forward?
It's a huge story, Tom Bryce, and you just said it great in the way that, like you said, the New York Knicks could get cold here and they could be sitting in 12th place. I mean, it's very close in these standings, and that's what makes it so fascinating this year, is that all these teams are basically right together, especially in the Eastern Conference, where, like you said, I mean, there's a very small separation between teams. Nobody is exactly playing at an elite level. Teams like Boston and Miami, remember, ladies and gentlemen, were in the Eastern Conference Finals last year at the top of the conference, and they're both hovering around 500 at the moment in the 4th and 6th spot. That's why teams like the Knicks and even teams like the Charlotte Hornets, who were playing very well, have been in the top 6 because of struggling teams like Miami and Boston. And even the top teams haven't played maybe the best brand of basketball they could have played yet. So we're going to see what happens, Tom Bryce. The schedule is very interesting. There's some teams like Miami who have the easiest schedule, and the teams like the Knicks who have a very difficult schedule in the second half of the season. So things could change. Teams like Atlanta, who we've talked about struggling, and Washington, and even Orlando, who we were expecting more out of, can definitely get on a hot streak here, and the standings can completely flip. But as a New York Knicks fan and a team that's definitely exceeded my expectations, I hope that they can stay consistent, which is the biggest word with the Knicks, consistency, and stay in that playoff mix.
We're going to certainly find out, the Brute Force. And listen, at the end of the day, who would have thought that the New York Knicks would be 5th in the Eastern Conference? So at the end of the day, the New York Knicks are ahead of the likes of the Toronto Raptors, who aren't too far away removed from being the NBA champions, and the Miami Heat, last year's Eastern Conference champions. So obviously, obviously there is a lot to look forward to as a Knicks fan. And we'll cover all of the latest happenings in the world of the NBA with our number one analyst for all the latest happenings in the world of sports. And we're talking about none other than the Brute Force Brad Weiss, one of the greatest players in SJC Long Island Golden Eagles men's basketball history, as I am the host of the Sports Report, the Reverend Tom Bryce. And for more information on the Sports Report, you can go to sportsreportx.com. And to listen to all of our archives with myself and the Brute Force, you can go to soundcloud.com/the Sports Report 2019. And you can also now check us out on our YouTube page by subscribing to the Sports Report, the number one global sports show, where you can also see Sunday's show with myself and the Brute Force and the likes of the Brute Force's teammate with our LI Brew crew. And that's Googs, Jake Guggenheimer, and Rob Morosca. So everybody can follow us now on YouTube by subscribing to the Sports Report, the number one global sports show, where you'll see Sunday shows each and every week on our YouTube page. And also want to give a huge shout out to the entire team here at Sportinarium, including Lakey, Arv, Dave, Dale, Sean, Susie, Steve, Sasha, Connor, Martin, 80. Also, our brand newest addition to the Sportinarium lineup, our very good friend Mike Lipinski, a longtime friend. So you better be in the fight when you listen to his shows. Obviously, Tuesdays, 5 p.m. Eastern Time, 10 p.m. UK time. So very excited about Mike Lipinski's show. And also huge shout outs, as always, to the entire team here at Sportinarium. And you can follow Sportinarium on Twitter and Instagram at Sportinarium. You can like Sportinarium on our Facebook page at Sportinarium Media. And most importantly, you can subscribe to the Sportinarium TV page, which is on YouTube at Sportinarium TV, where you can find Sports Report related content and all of the other great shows that are on Sportinarium.com, where you can find us Fridays, 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 10 to 12 UK time. We make it easy, everybody. Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, 5 to 7 Eastern Time. Sundays, 5 to 7 Eastern Time. Fridays to Sundays, 10 to 12 UK time. And as always, you'll always get the Brew Crew Hour. Sundays, 5 to 6, like with myself and the Brute Force kicking things off. And then the Brute Force's teammate, Googs, Jake Guggenheimer, is going to follow us here in a few minutes to talk all the latest happenings in the world of the NHL. And there is a lot to get into. And as always, the Brute Force want to make sure everybody follows our beloved LI Brew Crew on Instagram at LI Brew Crew and find out why the crew is brewing, and also find out what's going to happen with the team, as we're only a few weeks away from the start of the season. And as I always say, the Brute Force, I remember it like yesterday when we started talking about the team in the summer, when you guys just decided to form a team, and yet here you are, where you guys are going to be playing multiple days a week. And that's why everybody needs to follow the LA Brew Crew's Instagram page at LA Brew Crew. And we are here on the Sports Report, the number one global sports show, talking all the latest happenings in the world of sports with one of our favorites and one of the best in the business. That is the Brute Force Brad Weiss, as I am the host of the Sports Report, the Reverend Tom Bryce. And we are now together almost 1 year, 51 weeks. So we are definitely getting old, but we are getting stronger, and we are getting bigger and better than ever. And the Brute Force, speaking of things that are getting ready to be stronger and bigger and better than ever, is our major leaguers are getting ready for opening day here in a few short weeks. And for a worldwide audience here on Sportinarium, let's start off with our Yankees first, and some Yankees news and notes that you've seen so far here in spring training.
Yeah, so it's honestly awesome to get to watch some baseball again. It's been long overdue here, and it's exciting to see spring training going on as we get closer and closer to opening day coming up here towards the end of March and early April. In spring training, of course, the New York Yankees play in Tampa Bay, Florida, and they have certainly had an interesting start to the spring. The biggest news coming out of Yankees camp, which is very disappointing for the Yankees, is top relief pitcher Zach Britton is injured and has been put on the IL, the injured list, with an elbow injury, as he has a bone spur. He's going to need to remove via surgery and will be out until at least mid-June. And he is one of their top relievers. This is going to hurt. Some guys who are going to have to step up, though, Tom Bryce, are not exactly the household names that we're used to on the New York Yankees. Relief pitcher Adam Warren is going to need to step up. He's made 3 appearances in spring spring so far and hasn't allowed a run. Former Marlins relief pitcher Kyle Barraclough throws very hard and definitely has the capability. Did not do so well in his first appearance, allowed a run on a hit and a walk. And his last two, he's looked a little bit better, striking out 3 of his 6 batters. Guys like Nick Nelson, Nick Goody, and relief pitcher Luis Cessa, who has been god-awful to start the spring, has allowed at least a run in each of his 3 outings. In his latest outing against the Detroit Tigers, let up 3 runs and just did not look good. So the Yankees bullpen that was once called the super pen has certainly not looked like it and has not looked like a team that's going to be very formidable there. They're going to have guys like Michael King and Jonathan Loizaga, guys who have started and have tried to be starters on the Yankees, probably go and save the bullpen, because right now with Aroldis Chapman, we haven't even seen in grapefruit lead action yet, there's not a lot else you're looking forward to besides Britton, who's now injured. On the hitting front, real quick, Tom Bryce, Gleyber Torres has gotten off to a nice start with a .417 batting average in spring, as DJ LeMahieu has, as always, .357. He is hitting because he is a hitting machine. Jay Bruce, the former Mets outfielder, has 2 home runs in spring so far. He's batting .455. Certainly looking good for those Yankees. Brett Gardner hit a grand slam against former Met Zach Wheeler of the Phillies. So both of those outfielders have been good. Stanton has been solid, as well as Gary Sanchez hitting well. With him, it's all going to be about defense. But guys like Gio Urshela, Luke Voigt, Aaron Hicks, some of their regulars, Aaron Judge, Clint Frazier, have definitely gotten off the slow, below 200 batting average starts for the Yankees. So that's a little concerning. But overall, Tom Bryce, I am not concerned about the Yankees hitting. Their starting pitching has been pretty solid in spring with Garrett Cole, Jameson Taillon, Corey Kluber, amongst others. They've all been solid. But that Yankees bullpen, something that we thought, Tom Bryce, was going to be a staple for the Yankees, certainly looks like it's going to be troubling for the Yankees this season.
I think the Brute Force, you hit the nail on the head when it comes down to the keys for the Yankees season. That's Corey Kluber, because Corey Kluber, here's a guy that was one of the best pitchers in baseball for a 4 or 5 year period. He's a Cy Young Award winner. He won 18 games or more several times. I mean, this is somebody, if you look at the back of his baseball card, ladies and gentlemen, if he's even half of the Corey Kluber that we saw from 2014 to 2017 into 2018, I mean, watch out. I mean, because the Yankees could be in business, because that could be a 2-starter. So obviously the Yankees have lost some pitching when it came down to Paxton and Tanaka. We'll see if they're able to fill it. We'll see if they're going to be able to have the lineup that we think they might have, especially if Stanton and Judge is healthy and if Gary Sanchez can bounce back. And who knows about Jay Bruce? I mean, there's a lot to like, I think, when it comes to the Yankee lineup. Obviously, Luke Voigt's another name and DJ LeMahieu. So we know that the lineup is going to be good. I think it comes down to the pitching. Obviously, bullpen. Obviously, Zach Britton injury is definitely a blow for the Yankees. Obviously, starting pitching, we're going to see. Corey Kluber is definitely a wild card. And speaking of New York, the Brute Force, then what about our New York Mets? Because I think Met fans have a lot of optimism. There's a lot of high hopes with this team. And what have you seen so far here in spring training from the Mets?
Yeah, so kind of opposite to the New York Yankees, where the New York Yankees bullpen pieces have been bad. And normally we're used to having the Mets be the bad bullpen and the Yankees have the good one. But right now, it looks like the opposite in spring training, because the New York Mets bullpen has looked good in spring training so far. Edwin Diaz has looked very good to start the spring, and coming off a pretty solid year for Edwin Diaz, we're hoping he could be that guy that he was in Seattle and be our closer for the New York Mets. The relief pitcher Trevor May, who we obviously got in free agency, has looked good overall. Familia, Gazelman, Castro Hunter, Drew Smith, amongst others, have all pitched very solidly here in spring training. The only guy who has struggled a little bit is Dellin Betances, and we're going to need him to definitely step up here, as he allowed a 3-run homer to Ryan Zimmerman against the Nationals in a spring training game, and also let up a run in his last appearance. So he's going to need to step up his game. Now, the big story in Mets camp is that starting pitcher Carlos Carrasco has not made a start in an exhibition game yet in the Grapefruit League. Currently, he was experiencing some side effects from getting the COVID-19 vaccine, but more importantly, Tom Bryce, he is having some elbow soreness, and Luis Rojas came out today saying that he's not going to throw for this coming days, but they do expect him by late next week to get back to facing live batters. But certainly, we hope that his elbow soreness is not that bad. But speaking of people who don't have sore elbows, that is the GOAT, the DeGrom-inant Jacob DeGrom, who certainly looks like himself, has been great. His first performance in West Palm Beach against the Houston Houston Astros, pitched 2 great innings with 3 strikeouts and looked like himself throwing almost 100 miles an hour already in spring training. Marcus Stroman had a good first outing, struggled a little bit in the second against the Marlins, but overall has looked good. Taijuan Walker made his debut for the Mets and looked pretty solid. Did allow 2 runs, but had an overall good outing there. And then guys who we've had on this show, Tom Bryce and Marcel Renteria and Steven Nagosic, 2 guys who have pitched in spring training. Nagosic has looked pretty good for the Mets as he had a very nice outing in his first start. And the second one, he got into a bases loaded jam, but got right back out of it. And it was nice to see from a guy who has had a great interview with us on the show and definitely has a great mustache. So shout out to Steven Nagosic here on the show. Marcel Renteria had a tough go of it in his outing, but he will certainly get better as time goes on. It's been nice to see Francisco Lindor in that Mets jersey to start off the spring, and he started off 0-for-7, but in his last game had 2 hits. Brandon Nimmo has been great. One of Ernest Stubbs' favorite, Luis Guillorme, has been making gems of plays in spring training and has been hitting great, so shout out to Luis. Outfielder Kevin Pillar, the free agent, has been good. Amongst others, we're still waiting for Jeff McNeil and Dominic Smith to start hitting a little bit. They've struggled early on, but overall, it's been great to see some of Ernest Stubbs' guys he's been talking about here on our show. Some of these great prospects like Pete Crow Armstrong, Brett Beatty, Ronnie Mauricio just got the go-ahead hit against the Cardinals the other day, are playing some great baseball, and I look forward to continuing to see these prospects flourish, and everyone here on the Sports Report should look forward to hearing from Ernest Stubbs and Rob Morosca each and every week talking baseball. Ernest gives us some great insight on these prospects here who are doing big things to the Mets and will do big things to the Mets in the future.
No question, the brute force, that Steven Nagosic is somebody that we are definitely going to see once again in a New York Mets uniform come 2021. And I think that he has some unfinished business. I think that he got a raw deal in 2019. He had a couple of different stints here, and we know that that's on his mind. He had a huge offseason. He talked a lot about that with us on the show a few weeks ago, and we know that he is on his way to bigger and better things. And we also know that Marcel Renteria will get the job done. And just remember on that stat, the brute force, Marcel Renteria did have a lot of strikeouts in his appearance. So that is a positive for Marcel. We know that Marcel will get it together. He has come a long way in the Mets organization, and we know that he is a rising tide that lifts all boats. He is one of the most important guests in show history, a 3-time alum to the show. So we have a good feeling the next time that we speak with Marcel Renteria, he will be a New York Met this time. So let your hearts not be troubled. But the brute force, before we get your closing thoughts here, it's that time of year where I got to ask you, are you dancing? Because March Madness is once again upon us.
Yeah, let's get the madness going, Tom Bryce, as we're here in March on the Division I basketball. College sports, of course, is going on this week and this year, as March Madness will be played this year on the Division I level. And I am super excited to see it go down this year, as I will be filling out some brackets, and certainly I'll be here for all our great listeners worldwide to help you fill out your best bracket for this year's tournament. Now, to go on and start previewing what we're going to see next week when the bracket does come out, the full bracket, we're going to talk about some of the teams that have already punched their ticket to the Division I tournament this year. Starting with Liberty College from the ASUN Conference. The Big South Conference champion was Winthrop College. In the CAA, this one was an interesting one. Number 6 seed out of 8, Drexel, got the win and defeated my dad's alma mater, Elon, the number 8 seed in the championship game. Elon, my dad's alma mater, got through Towson, who was the play-in game in the first round. They got through the number 1 seed, James Madison, and then beat a very good team here from Long Island, number 4 seed, Hofstra, to get to the championship against Drexel. And Drexel also beat some great teams like the College of Charleston and Northeastern to get the win over Elon in the championship. Certainly a great tournament there. Horizon League champions were the Cleveland State. Missouri Valley Conference was Loyola Chicago, who people have heard of course. In the Northeast Conference, number 4 seed Mount St. Mary's got the win. And of course, that conference in the Northeast Conference features Sacred Heart. Sacred Heart was the number 3 seed, and that team features 2-time Rookie of the Week, Mike Sixsmith, a friend of ours on the show. Billy Sixsmith was formerly on our show, and Mike is having a tremendous season in his freshman year at Sacred Heart, is shooting 54%, ladies and gentlemen, 54% from 3, which is nearly impossible in this day and age. And that is a Division I NCAA best out of all players, 54% from 3, having a tremendous rookie year, and that is Mike Sixsmith. He did lose to Bryant, who eventually did lose to Mount St. Mary's, and the number 1 seed in that conference was Staten Island's own Tom Rice, Wagner University, who lost to Mount St. Mary's in the first round. Another one here, Morehead State in the Ohio Valley got the win. The Southern Conference winner was UNC Greensboro. The Summit League was Oral Roberts. And this one, ladies and gentlemen, is personal for me. In the Sun Belt Conference, Appalachian State won the championship. And the point guard for Appalachian State is Mike Almonacci, Long Island's own from Brentwood, New York, a teammate of mine for multiple years on Team Express with Jerry Powell from Basketball Results. This guy was a great player when we got to play together. He continued to push and push to get to the Division I level. Considered not playing anymore, but he went out and got an offer to go to Appalachian State as he made the most of it, dropping 32 points in the championship game and earned an all-tournament honor and played amazing for Appalachian State. So shout out to my former teammate and a great player from here on Long Island, as that is Mike Almonacci. The final conference here, the West Coast Conference, Gonzaga once again won the conference against BYU in the championship game and will be one of the favorites to win the entire Division I bracket. So next week, we're going to have a lot more teams and the full bracket to come here. I'll have some of my sleeper picks, some of my best picks, and a couple more things as the madness breaks out, Tom Bryce. March 18th, we will begin all the games here on the College Division I March Madness bracket, and I can't wait to cover it here on Sports Report.
We're looking forward to that. Unfortunately, very sorry to hear about the Wagner Seahawks not being able to go to the NCAA tournament. The Brute Force, it's not too often that Wagner's in that position. And shout out also to Mike Sixsmith, who, listen, Billy was a great shooter. No question that Billy won some big games at Baruch, but I think Mike is well on his way to exceeding all the great things that Billy did. So listen, March Madness is upon us. I look forward to speaking with you about all the games and who's in, who's out. So there's still a lot of basketball to be played. I know it's not the same in years past when it comes to the tournament, but the fact again, ladies and gentlemen, that we have a tournament, we have things to talk about. We're on our way to normalcy. Our friends in the UK now are seeing restrictions being eased. They're on their way to having a full summer that's going to be normal and everything's going to open up. And we're about 50% of the way there, I think, here in New York. So a rising tide lifts all boats, and each and one of you listening has been that rising tide that is going to lift us and has lifted us to where we are today. And for you, my friend, I want to give you the floor. I want to give you any closing thoughts. As always, plug where our listeners can get in touch and keep up to date with all the great things that you do for us. You're an integral reason as to why we're the #1 global sports show. So you know the drill, my friend. Plug where listeners get in touch with you, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, Tom, thank you again for another great week of New York's #1 sports show and now the global #1 sports show, and that's the Sports Report. Of course, as Tom mentioned earlier, be sure to go on and subscribe to our new YouTube page, the Sports Report, the #1 global sports show, for all the latest with the show. Also, stay tuned with our website, www.sportsreportx.com, because in a couple of weeks, I'm going to have a blog out with some of the cool things from our first year together with me and Tom Bryce. As he mentioned, the anniversary of our 1 year is coming up officially on March 25th. I'll have some of the great throwback videos as well as some awesome content on sportsreportx.com. So you do not want to miss that. Stay tuned with our website. Thanks to the frontline workers, as always, doctors, nurses, delivery people, all the people on the front lines who do tremendous work and are the true heroes during this COVID-19 time. And they're the true heroes in general for everything, because they are those people who are definitely saving many lives. So across the world, thank you to our frontline workers every single week here on the Sports Report. My social media is at BWeiss20 on Instagram and Snapchat, and at Brad Weiss20 on Twitter. I'd like to always thank Sportinarian for having us here on the show. Thank you to their entire team and our great team here on the Sports Report, including our great host, Tom Bryce, Rob Morosca, and Ernest Dove on baseball. My teammate you're about to hear from in a moment, Jake Guggenheimer, who we'll be seeing soon on the softball field, and you'll be hearing on the World on the NHL hockey, and Craig Holman on baseball. Thank you to the entire team at Sportinarium as well as our team. You could hear us on sportinarium.com every weekend, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays from 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Always a shout out to Level Up as I am beginning my coaching journey. The schedule for the games is right around the corner, Tom Bryce, as I will be on the sidelines coaching up my 3rd and 7th graders. Can't wait. We'll have some YouTube links as well for people who want to watch it. And make sure you follow on Instagram for all the latest with the Level Up teams at levelup_LI, where you can get the latest and also listen to their great podcast they have at Level Up Your B-Ball Pod, where they've had some of the greatest guests around. Be sure to listen to all that. As we want to conclude this week's episode, the Brute Crew, Long Island's premier softball team, is returning to regular season action on Sunday, March 28th. But Tom Bryce, we'll be back sooner than you think, as we will have a scrimmage on Sunday, March 21st. So we will be seeing the field sooner than we thought, as we will be scrimmaging Don Palumbo's brothers team and getting ourselves warmed up for another championship aspiring season. So we cannot wait for that. I'm hearing people around town, parents, friends. Oh yeah, the Brute Crew is coming back, right? And everybody is so excited to see the softball team back on the field. Can't thank everybody enough. And make sure you follow the LI Brute Crew on Instagram at LI Brute Crew. And be sure to follow our great sponsors at Ridgewood Station Tavern in Wantaw, one of the best bars and taverns around with some of the best deals, including their Monday through Friday lunch combo from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. One of the greatest deals around. Be sure to check it out by following them on Instagram at Ridgewood_Station_Tavern. So overall, Tom, I cannot wait for all of this to get going here. And I certainly cannot wait for another great episode next week of New York's #1 sports show and the global #1 sports show here on Sportinarium, the top global sports radio station around. And that, all, ladies and gentlemen, can be here on the Sports Report. Thank you to everybody. Can't wait to do it again next week.
That was a mouthful that you said, the Brute Force. But most importantly, huge shout outs to the Brute Crew and the rest of the team. And I know that you and Googs are very excited about getting back on the field. And I think we have something in the works coming up here for the season that stay tuned, because our worldwide audience here on Sportinarium, I think, is going to be very curious and is going to be hearing about that in the near and distant future. And I also want to wish a congratulations here to the Niblock family, because Chris and his beautiful wife, Kristen, have now welcomed a 4th child. I mean, the Brute Force, they definitely have a house full, but it's a well-deserved house full. And God bless and congratulations to the Niblock family. So we definitely know that there's going to be a future of Golden Eagles there on the roster. And the Niblock family is well known when it comes to SJC. And we got a good feeling that the rest of the family is going to be well suited in the future when it comes to future Golden Eagles. So I want to make sure we extend our congratulations and well wishes to the Niblock family, especially Chris, who we had the honor to have on the show not too long ago, and his beautiful wife, Kristen. Also, congratulations to them on their child, CJ. Cannot wait to see what the future brings for them. So God bless you, Chris. God bless you and your beautiful wife and your family. Congratulations to you. Also want to wish a happy birthday again to the drummer of the Superlatives, Jamie Galdi, last week's guest on the show. So want to make sure that they get recognized. And also huge shout outs to the entire force. May the force be with everybody, including the super force, the strong force, the gentle force, and the special force. There's so many forces. We just say, may the force be with you. And the Brute Force, looking forward to next week. Looking forward to the future. Congratulations on all of your success, and we'll talk with you next week.
Thank you, Tom. And once again, to second what you just said, congratulations to the Niblock family. More SJC stars and basketball stars on the horizon. And shout out to my teammate, Doug Niblock, who is doing a tremendous job with Boys to Men, doing a great job coaching as well. So shout out to them. Tom, let's do it again next week. Can't wait. Goose, give us some good analysts on the world of the NHL.
As we're here on the Sports Report, the #1 global sports show with the Brute Force Brad Weiss, one of the greatest players in SJC Long Island Golden Eagles men's basketball history, as I am the host of the Sports Report, the Reverend Tom Bryce. And stay tuned for more hard-hitting analysis here on Sportinarium as we talk with the Brute Force's teammate, Googs, Jake Guggenheimer, to talk all the latest happenings in the world of the NHL, as we are here on the Sports Report, the #1 global sports show, as we were just with the Brute Force Brad Weiss of of the Level Up Basketball Organization and the LA Brew Crew. And we're here on Sportinarium at sportinarium.com. And stay tuned for all the latest happenings in the world of the NHL with Jake Guggenheimer. As we're here on the Sports Report, the number one global sports show with our number one NFL and NHL analyst. And after we just heard from his teammate on our LA Brew Crew, the Brute Force Brad Weiss, we got to bring in one of the glues to the team who only hit .564 this past season for our 2020 ABA St. Louis Cardinals division champions, our beloved LI Brew Crew, and he was also a three-time Canadian National Baseball champion with our McGill Redbirds, and he's become one of the best analysts around in the business, and especially here on Sportinarium. And without further ado here on the Sports Report, the number one global sports show, Googs, Jake Guggenheimer. My friend, how are you?
Always a pleasure when I get to speak to you, Tom. So looking forward to talking about some puck and the week that's been within the New York metro area.
Absolutely. And there is a lot of comings and goings with the Islanders and Rangers. Obviously, the Islanders are red hot, but there might be a question mark when it comes to that. We'll get into that in a few minutes. And the Rangers, unfortunately, have lost a couple of games here and have run into some tough opponents. And we'll get into that for sure. But Jake, for our worldwide audience here on Sportinarium listening, there was some news that might change the landscape, especially when it comes to the NHL, in that the NHL is returning to ESPN for the first time in 17 years. And this is a pretty big deal here, Jake, that the NHL is returning to ESPN. I think we'll get ready to hear that music once again. Da, 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 da. We have not heard that music in a long time, and it's definitely given me back some memories. So for our worldwide audience here on Sportinarium, I wanted to talk about your thoughts on the NHL and the ESPN agreeing to a 7-year contract for the NHL to return back to ESPN.
Yeah, Tom, like you said, 7-year contract between ESPN and the NHL. So it's going to include 25 regular season games on either of the ESPN or ABC platforms, early round playoff series, and a conference final each year, 4 Stanley Cup series on ABC, and more than 1,000 games streaming across ESPN Plus and Hulu. And that's just something that is a long time coming. And we spoke about this a little bit off the air with regards to how long it's actually been since ESPN has broadcasted an NHL game. And I think that, the last time, was it Carolina winning the Stanley Cup?
It was Tampa Bay versus Calgary, the 7th game of
Tampa
the
Bay,
2004 Stanley
right.
Cup Finals. Yep.
Right. Yeah. And it's a long time coming. I think this is a great deal for both ESPN and the NHL. I think for ESPN, you bring over a pretty brand new user base because a lot of NHL fans don't ever really tune into ESPN, considering most of the games, nationally televised are on NBC. So, you pick up that if you're ESPN, and then if you're the NHL, you get a lot of new casual ESPN watchers watching you. So people who are flipping through channels, maybe sports fans want to throw on ESPN to see what's on, regardless of what's on they watch. An NHL game broadcasting is going to be something that a lot of people are going to be attracted to because it's something new. So, yeah, I mean, the first NHL game was 1979. They obviously took the break in 2004 after that Stanley Cup, and we're back, baby. ESPN and the NHL.
Let me ask you, though, a question. Does this mean the end of the NHL on NBC?
I don't think it means the end of the NHL on NBC. I think actually what you're going to see because of COVID actually is a lot more large TV deals for the major sports leagues. And because, listen, TV networks didn't lose any money during but sports franchises are, obviously, with the loss of fans, concession sales, all that stuff, ticket sales. So I think what you're going to see is a lot of these leagues try to expand their national platform audience so they can bring in TV viewership and have those lucrative contracts with TV stations that will make up some of the money that they're losing. So I wouldn't be surprised if you saw maybe like MLB either extend their deal with Fox or, try to get something going. Maybe, instead of just Sunday Night Baseball as being the nationally televised game on ESPN, they do like a Monday Night Baseball. I know they used to do that. Obviously, you've seen the NFL is going with this split Super Bowl. 1 year it's on CBS, 1 year it's on NBC. So it's crazy to see how this is panning itself out. But honestly, I think with the world being the way it is right now, it's probably going to continue and trending towards this way.
That's something interesting, though, when it came to terms of the deal in that 25 regular season games games would be broadcasted either on ESPN or ABC. Right now, the NHL on NBC, for the most part, we've seen probably about, I would say, anywhere between 8 to 10 regular season games a year. We've seen a handful of special games, these outdoor classics, and we've seen obviously the Rangers and Islanders in a few of those. And we've also seen a significant number of playoff games on NBC. But there's always been Wednesday night hockey and Thursday night hockey on NBC Sports Network. Obviously, NBC Sports Network, as we know, is no longer going to exist at the end of the year, which might be one of the reasons why the NHL agreed to this contract with ESPN. But when I hear 25 games, Jake, for the person that's not going to go out and buy ESPN Plus or not going to buy Hulu, is that a good representation for the NHL?
I mean, 25 games gives you a chance to pretty much get every team on national television. So, yeah, I think the sample size might be a little small, but I mean, that's still more games than you're seeing nationally televised right now. But obviously, NBC's not going to let their Wednesday night hockey spot go. So it's going to create a bidding war between a lot of these programming stations. And it's going to be pretty fun to see where leagues go to broadcast their TV. I mean, right now, the NBA has the deal with TNT, and then they also have their deal with ESPN and ABC. I wouldn't be surprised to see NBC have to pick it up a little bit and try to keep the NHL around, especially if ESPN is trying to pull them away. So look, I think for the most part, you're going to see a lot of people be attracted to the sport, which is the plus here. And while it's a small sample size, it'll give people who aren't necessarily too familiar with the sport an opportunity to watch and learn what hockey's all about. And you and I both know hockey's a great game. So the more people you bring in, I think the more beneficial this becomes for the NHL. And for that reason, I think that it's a pretty pristine opportunity.
Well, I will say, Jake, I remember as a kid growing up in Brooklyn when ESPN2 and ESPN used to broadcast NHL games, and we used to get them for the most part on Saturday nights and Friday nights. We usually got a game on ESPN2 Saturday nights, and ESPN, we got Friday night games. So I will say in the past, especially growing up in the 1990s up until 2004, ESPN, I always felt, did a very good job in terms of representing the NHL. In fact, I always liked the ESPN presentation of the NHL much better than the NBA presentation on ESPN. So I do think that that's a step up in the right direction for the NHL with ESPN. I know that a lot of people have been clamoring for that now for the past couple of years. And I will say, though, I do enjoy also the NBC Sports / NBC presentation of the NHL. And I would like to see that stay. I've enjoyed it. I think that the NHL has made a bit of a comeback, I think, in terms of publicity, in terms of the overall marketing of the game. Because if you think about it, Jake, in 2006, when the league came back, it was on the Outdoor Network. I mean, it was OLN, and it was on this network you couldn't even find, and it was a joke almost. And NBC carried some games, but in terms of the overall cable package, for a very long time, the NHL package was subpar, to say the least. So I do want to give a lot of credit to NBC for their presentation of the NHL, and I'm certainly optimistic and hopeful that we'll get to see some different partners here. I like to see NBC stay. I like to see ESPN stay, obviously, now for the long term. And I think I agree with you in terms of how the NBA has done it. I think that's a good sign. Even Major League Baseball, and I think even with the NFL, with the Super Bowl rotation, and now even with Thursday Night Football and NFL Network and the Fox packages and the CBS and the Sunday Night NBC game and ESPN's Monday night package, I think that would be a step in the right direction for the league. But Jake, speaking of the NHL, and those New York Islanders are red hot right now. They're 14-2-2 their last 18 games. They have still not lost at the Nassau Coliseum. They have won 12 games by 2 goals or more. They are 17-6-4. So the Islanders are as dominant as you could be, as we're now just about at the halfway point. But be that as it may, Jake, despite all those things we just mentioned, the Islanders' season may very well be with a question mark, because their leading goal scorer and the heart and soul of this team, the captain, Anders Lee, left early in the first period of the game against the Devils here Thursday night. And for our worldwide audience on Sportinarium, what's your thoughts on how this could impact the Islanders with the potential loss looming of the captain, Anders Lee?
Yeah, I mean, since we spoke last time, Tom, 4-0, right? So, 5-2 wins against Buffalo at home, 2-1 win against Boston at home, and then this win against New Jersey at home. 4 really just solid games from the Islanders. They got their defense when they needed it. They scored goals when they needed to. It was really impressive. But yeah, like you said, Anders Lee going down is a tough loss for the Islanders. It's hard to cope with losing your captain, regardless of the time of year. And right now, when it's a pretty important time to start, separating yourself from the rest of the conference, it's a tough time to lose that guy. He's a big part of their team. But, they've won 7 games in a row, I think, dating back to February 28th, like the end of the month. They haven't lost in the month of March. They've got 38 points out of a possible 54, and they're sitting on top of the East. So I think they're really well positioned to take this hit and kind of continue to move forward. It's definitely a tough loss, but their team is clicking on all cylinders right now. And, if it wasn't for that rough 5-game stretch earlier in the year, like towards the end of January, the Islanders might be vying for the President's Cup, and I think they still are. I think they definitely have the opportunity to win the President's Trophy.
No question that the Islanders are on a run that's similar to the start of last year, 2019-20, where the Islanders had their longest streak without a loss in regulation going back to the glory days. So, Jake, it's been a very long time that we've seen the Islanders at the top of any standings or as on a long of a winning streak that they've been here these past couple of years. I mean, if you think about it, in my lifetime, in your lifetime, Islanders really haven't had much success with the exception of 2014-15 season and 2015-16, where we see the Islanders win their first postseason series in 23 years. But we had talked about it on last week's show about, do you tinker with this team and do you make a move, because could the Islanders be a cup contender? And right now they're at the top of the standings. We're at the halfway point. Obviously things can change, and we saw that last year where the Islanders were hot. They were in first place on and off for about 2.5 months of the season last year, and they fell off drastically and they hung on for dear life, and really the pandemic put the Islanders in the playoffs. But let's say Anders Lee is hurt though, and he misses a significant amount of time. Does that change your outlook on the team? And let's say maybe making a move to acquire some type of offense to replace the captain, somebody who scored 40 goals and leads your team with 12 goals this year?
Yeah, I think that's their top goal scorer. I mean, that's their heart and soul right there. I mean, besides Barzal, he's probably the guy who you expect to be out there and leading that team and kind of pushing them along. So I definitely think it's important, and it definitely might, be the case where this changes things and they have to go out and try to acquire an offensive piece. I think their team is really solid right now. I think they don't need to tinker with it too much, but getting an offensive piece that can fill in for Anders Lee right now and then also provide secondary line scoring post that when he comes back is important for them. And if they want to continue to make this playoff push and really, show that last year wasn't a fluke, make it to the Stanley Cup final, they're going to need that, because they're going to need to play tight games where a goal matters and they need to get one. And I don't know who you really turn to in this situation right this very second, besides maybe Matt Barzal.
Well, Barzal has clearly shown you that he's an all-star and he's a superstar player, and we're going to see if he's ready to take the mantle and lead this team and give you a bull by the horns, because he very well might have to, because obviously Anders Lee is a veteran player. He's been an Islander now a very long time. This is his 8th year with the team, and there are guys like Brock Nelson, Jordan Eberle is a veteran player. So I do think what helps this team is that there are some veteran players here, and this core, you think about it, has been together a long time. I mean, Josh Bailey scores the other night, and Josh Bailey's been an Islander going back now 13 years. I mean, we've talked about this on the Sports Report in the past. I mean, we actually have said that Josh Bailey will be recognized in team history, and you look at the numbers, I mean, he's a very polarizing figure, but the numbers would indicate that, yeah, Josh Bailey's going to go down all time as a great Islander, and he very well might even have his number retired. But I want to ask you this question, because you've been a great player, you've won championships, you understand what it's like to be in a locker room, to be in a clubhouse where you're in these games and everything counts and you're playing for something. You can clearly tell when a team has it and when a team doesn't. You've been there. So if Lee is out for an extended amount of time, and you're a player in that clubhouse right now, in that dressing room, you're one of those Islanders, what do you do? What do you say? I mean, how do you approach this?
Just got to be a next man up mentality. Pick it up for your captain. Keep yourself in the hunt until he comes back, and then take off from there. So, look, it's always tough to lose a really good player on your team. It's happened in the past with teams I've played on. It just kind of stinks. But I think for the most part, like I said, have the ability to withstand this and will withstand this and be fine.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to see if a rising tide is going to lift the Islanders. If Anders Lee is injured for a significant amount of time, we are certainly keeping our fingers crossed. But until then, it is a yes, 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 a very good time to be an Islanders fan. And we are certainly looking forward to some Islander action here coming up here in the coming weeks, and hopefully some playoff hockey at the Coliseum. Once again, it was good to see our frontline workers being honored here against the game with the Devils, over 1,000 of them. So we're getting closer and closer to some normalcy, and we are feeling very normal right now, talking all the latest happenings in the world of the NHL with our number one NHL analyst, and that's Googs, Jake Guggenheimer of our LI Brew Crew. As I am the host of the Sports Report, the Reverend Tom Bryson. For more information on the Sports Report, you can go to sportsreportx.com, and to listen to all of our archives with myself and Jake Guggenheimer, you can go to soundcloud.com/the Sports Report 2019. And you can also check out all of our Sunday shows with Googs and his teammate, the Brute Force Brad Weiss, on our YouTube page by subscribing to the Sports Report, the number one global sports show, where you'll see sports report related content with the Brute Force, with Googs, and our own Rob Morosca. And as always, a huge shout out to the entire team here at Sportinarium, including Lakey, Arv, Dave, Dale, Susie, Sasha, Connor, Martin, everybody at Sportinarium, and also our new addition to the lineup, including Mike Lipinski, very good friend, longtime friend Mike Lipinski, with his brand new show In the Fight. So everybody on Sportinarium gets a huge shout out. And for more information on Sportinarium, you can go to sportinarium.com, where, Jake, of course, most importantly, you can listen to the Sports Report Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. UK time. And you can follow Sportinarium on Twitter and Instagram at Sportinarium. You can also like Sportinarium on Facebook at Sportinarium Media. You can subscribe to the Sportinarium TV YouTube page at Sportinarium TV, where you will see sports report related content amongst all of the great other shows, including Women's Fight News. Of course, Sasha and Susie do a great job with that. The Spartan Show with Lakey and Arv, and obviously Connor's show, where we talk about all the latest happenings in the world of MMA, and Mike Lipinski's show In the Fight. Cannot wait to hear that each and every week. Mike Lipinski, somebody we've known here for a very long time. Happy he's with the Sportinarium family. So there is a lot going on here on Sportinarium. We are very humbled to be on the number one global radio station, and we always like to joke that the Sports Report did help build Sportinarium. So Sportinarium is the show and the station that the Sports Report has built. And as always, a huge shout out to the entire team at the LI Brew Crew. Of course, the Brute Force and Googs' team, is the boys are getting ready to play here. In fact, we got a scrimmage coming up here next week. Games start March 28th, and everybody needs to keep up to date with the Brew Crew by going to Instagram and liking the LI Brew Crew's page and following it at LI Brew Crew. That's LI Brew Crew at LI Brew Crew on Instagram. Make sure everybody gives a follow to the LI Brew Crew's Instagram page so we can see more highlights of Googs hitting home runs. We'll see about the Brute Force, but everybody needs to follow the Brew Crew on Instagram. And huge shout out to Jake and Kyle Supran for running the page. They do a phenomenal job. It was a tremendous honor for us to have them on the show here. And we are talking all things related to Jake and Kyle Supran's favorite subject, of course, which is our New York Rangers, with Googs, Jake Guggenheimer, here on the Sports Report. And Jake, it brings us to our New York Rangers, because at the start of the week, I was really optimistic about this team. But after the last two games, is it time to push the panic button?
Just quickly before we get into that, shouting out Jake and Kyle Supran. Actually, the three of us, Tom, are going to the Ranger game on Wednesday against Philadelphia. So it'll be a nice Brew Crew Rangers game. We got some tickets and we're going to go. So we're looking forward to that for sure. And also, with reference to the Rangers, I think there's a lot of things that can be said about them right now. I think they're not playing their best hockey, which is tough because, they did have a nice stretch. But right here, right now, we got to look at the positives. And I think that's the way we're going to have to look at this with the Rangers. Their defense has been pretty good. 8th in goals against in the league. They're right up there with the top defensive teams. Their penalty kill is second in the league at 87%. They're absolutely killing it on the penalty kill. The only team I think that's above them right now is Boston, I believe. And, obviously Boston is playing just absolutely fantastic hockey. But the Islanders do have their number. Panarin was back at practice the other day. Not 100% sure when he's going to entirely be back, but need him in the lineup for sure. Shesterkin's still hurt. They're considering him day to day, but it looks like he's going to be out for a decent period of time. So Georgiev's really got to step up. Right now, he's not playing 100% his best, but he'll get there and he'll be okay. One good thing, Kreider, he's been scoring a lot of goals. He's at 13 for the year. Buchnevich leads the team points at 20 with 13 assists, 7 goals. So there's a lot to look at and be pretty confident about, but there's also a lot where you got to say, hey, do we pack it in and try to, keep our guys healthy and just get back at it next year? Or do we really got to, try to go out there, make a big splash acquisition and really try to turn this team around because time's running out?
Yeah, that's the thing, Jake, because I feel like sometimes we're on the air and I'm ready to say, all right, this team can go on a playoff run. And then you talk about Panarin and you figure, all right, we're getting the bread man back and that's going to be a boost and that's going to lift the guys because they know that help is on the way. And we weren't even sure a couple of weeks ago when he was coming back. And the fact that one way or another, he's coming back sooner than expected, you kind of think it would give this team a lift. And you look at the numbers in terms of statistics, the Rangers really aren't that bad of a team. But is it also because you talk about the Bruins, you talk about the Flyers, the Penguins are hot? I mean, unfortunately, the way I look at this division right now, it's just as tough a division you're going to have in sports. The Islanders are red hot. The Capitals are always the Capitals. You got the Penguins who have bounced up. You got Boston, who's actually fourth in this division, yet they're 14-6-4. I mean, so you look at the top 4 teams, and you got the Flyers, who aren't too bad of a team either. I mean, the competition in this division, I mean, it's as good as any division you're going to find in sports. I mean, is it also just luck of the draw here, Jake, and that this is a really stacked division?
I think yes, but when you look at it, honestly, Tom, look at where they are right now in the standings. They're behind 4 other teams that are Metropolitan Conference teams normally. So really, even if the aligning wasn't the way it is now, they're still out of the playoff picture right now. Maybe they're competing for one of those 2 wild card spots, but right now they're not even in 4th place in their real conference. So yeah, it's tough. It's like you see so many things that you like, right? You see the young guys playing well. You see the penalty kill amazing. The power play is actually picked up in the last couple games. They have the goal scorers on that team to score, put the puck in the net, run it up on teams. They play fast. They play hard. It's just, I think they're just not putting a complete game together all the time. And that's the tough part. They'll have scoring, but their goaltending won't play well. Or their goalie will play great, but they can't put the puck in the net. They'll be fantastic on the penalty kill, but their power play gives up a shorthanded goal, which happened tonight. And it's tough because they have the talent. They're just not putting games together right now, unfortunately. It's tough. It's frustrating.
What is the 1 or 2 things that the Rangers need to do between now and next week to get back on track?
Get whole again. Have Artemi come back. Put your offense back together. Hopefully Shesterkin's okay. Solidify the goaltending, and you'll be fine. Your defense is good. The defense is playing really well. Fox is establishing himself as one of the best defensemen in the league. Keandre Miller has played very, very well defensively for a young guy. Lindgren is Lindgren. He's scrappy. He's there. Truba's back from injury. They have the components. They just need to put it together. Get whole again. Put it all together, and you'll be fine. These last 27 games of the year are going to be very, very, very difficult. You're going to play a lot of really good teams, obviously teams that are fighting for a playoff spot. You're going to have to bring it every night, and they're really going to have to try to put it all together, and hopefully, they turn things around really quickly.
Listen, ladies and gentlemen, every game for the Rangers here on in is going to be a 7th game of the Stanley Cup Finals. So if you're not psyched and you're not ready to go, then clearly you don't belong on the ice. But the Rangers, I still, again, wouldn't count them out. You win a couple of games here. You beat the Flyers, a team that's right ahead of you in the standings. You win these games. You win 2 of these next 3. You do it 2 out of 3. 2 out of 3. They just keep doing 2 out of 3s. If the Rangers do that, it could very easily turn around here very quickly. And I still think Panarin can be that boost for this team because he's shown it before. You put him together with Kreider and Buchnevich, and we're waiting for a few other guys like Zibanejad to heat up. And I think this Rangers team can still get on a run. And obviously for you, Jake and Kyle, the Superman brothers, let's hope you guys get a win on Wednesday and we can talk and you guys are in a good mood about the Rangers. And we look forward to covering all the latest happenings in the world of the NHL with you. you on next week's show. And for you, my friend, I want to give you the floor. I want to give any closing thoughts. As always, plug where our listeners can get in touch with you. I cannot thank you enough for all that you do for us, as you're an integral reason as to why we're the #1 global sports show. So you know the drill, my friend. Plug where listeners get in touch with you, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, Tom, always available on Instagram at Jake Guggenheimer 11, always available on Twitter at JM Guggen. Another big shout out to our frontline workers who are doing such a great job in handling this pandemic, allowing us to go back to sports games and be able to do all these fun things, helping really solidify and reopen, what is such a great city. Just a quick, note, I am actually going to be on Reckless Airwaves Radio next week previewing the MLB season. I'm really looking forward to it. Tom, you were integral in setting this opportunity up. I think it'll be really nice to get a nice opportunity to talk with some new people about a different subject. So if anyone here is interested in listening to me, I'll be on Reckless Airwaves Radio next Wednesday, and I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you for setting that up, Tom. So that being said, I'm going to, sign off here. It was great talking another week of hockey with you. Let's go Rangers. I'll report back on Wednesday how my experience was in Madison Square Garden, given COVID and everything that's going on. And listen, I'm looking forward to next week.
Looking forward to that, Jake. And ladies and gentlemen, you heard it first. Our friends over at Reckless Airwaves Radio are going to be talking with Googs Jake Guggenheimer after they spoke with Rob Morosca. We now get to hear Googs on Reckless Airwaves Radio. And everybody can follow Reckless Airwaves Radio on Twitter and Facebook now they're working on. And obviously, everybody can go to recklessairwavesradio.com and also follow the Twitter page for more updates where we'll get to hear from Googs. And we know that some other players on the show we're going to get to hear from in the Sportinarium network of presenters here are going to be on Reckless Airwaves Radio. So we're very excited about that. And also very eager and curious to hear your thoughts next Wednesday after you went to the Garden to see what that's like now post-COVID, or in the COVID world, as they may say. So very curious to see what that experience was like, and looking forward to all of that. Congratulations once again on being on Reckless Airwaves Radio, and congratulations for getting to go on Wednesday's game. Let's bring home a W. Let's hope you're in a good mood, and cannot wait to report back on everything you hear at the Garden, and then also for Reckless Airwaves Radio. And we'll speak with you next week.
Always in a good mood talking to you, Tom, regardless of the outcome of a Ranger game.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, ladies and gentlemen, the crew is definitely brewing as we are here on the Sports Report, the #1 global sports show with Googs Jake Guggenheimer, one of the greatest players in McGill Redbirds history, a 3-time Canadian National Baseball champion, and only hit .564 for our LI Brew Crew, who won the 2020 ABA St. Louis Cardinals Division Championship, alongside who we just heard from a little while ago, the Brute Force Brad Weiss, for our LI Brew Crew Hour, as we are here on the Sports Report, the #1 global sports show. And stay tuned for more hard-hitting analysis here on Sportinarium as we talk with our longest tenured analyst on the Sports Report, that's our own Rob Morosca, to talk all the latest happenings in the world of Major League Baseball. As I am the host of the Sports Report, the Reverend Tom Bryce. Stay tuned for more hard-hitting analysis with our own Rob Morosca, as we were just with Googs Jake Guggenheimer here on Sportinarium, the #1 global radio station. As we're here on the Sports Report, the #1 global sports show with our longest tenured analyst, and that's our #1 analyst for all the latest happenings in the world of Major League Baseball, and that's our own Rob Morosca. My friend, how are you?
Hey, Tom, good to be back this week once again.
Always good to talk with you, my friend. And we're getting there, almost there now to opening day and the start of the season. We're just a few short weeks away, and we finally are getting some spring-like weather here in the Big Apple. And we're getting ready soon, hopefully, to put away those winter coats and get ready to put our baseball caps on, and hopefully get the opportunity to go to some games, as we're definitely getting closer to normalcy. And Mr. Morosca, before we get into all the latest happenings in the world of Major League Baseball, and technically does actually have to do with our New York Yankees, and that there was some very scary news with Aaron Boone, the Yankees manager.
Yeah, that's right. He actually had to leave the Yankees for a week to get a pacemaker installed. Everything's going good now. He's already set to return to the dugout this weekend, but he got a pacemaker inserted. And once he clears COVID-19 intake testing, he'll be back in the dugout.
Very good news to hear. And you never like when you hear any news related when it comes to the heart and a pacemaker, and especially with Aaron Boone, because he's had some history with this this before.
That's right. He was feeling dizzy and he had lightheadedness. He felt lightheaded and he didn't feel good all spring. So he got himself checked out and he needed a pacemaker. So he got that done. And actually, he says he feels better now than he has in a long, long time. But yes, he did have heart surgery in 2009. And the heart is dangerous. And we're just glad that he's making quick recovery. He said that he feels great.
And we certainly hope that Aaron Boone continues to have a speedy recovery because we want to see him in the dugout. We certainly want to see him lead our Yankees, and we'll certainly see what happens when it comes to the Yankee season, which we're going to get into here in a minute for our worldwide audience here on Sportinarium, the #1 global radio station. And Mr. Morosca, when it comes to the Yankees, I know we didn't have this planned, but we got to bring him up, and that's Jay Bruce, because Jay Bruce, I don't think we were too high on starting the Yankees season here in spring training, and we weren't quite sure if he even had a real shot at making the ball club. But I got to tell you, so far, Mr. Morosca, he's 4 for 8, hit a home run here earlier this week, and he's making a strong case as somebody that could maybe be a fourth outfielder and come off the bench for the Yankees.
You know, it's typical. You got a lot because anytime an ex-Met goes to the Yankees, it seems like they are doing great, that they do great stuff. And we could go down the line, which we've had. David Cohn, I mean, when he got the Yankees, forget about it. It was amazing. Perfect game, unbelievable. And even Strawberry, couldn't pitch a no-hitter for the Yankees. I mean, he couldn't even pitch one for the Mets. So this happens a lot.
Hey, listen, even Robin Ventura was an all-star with the Yankees. Had a pretty good year as a Yankee in the 2002 season. So we've seen this happen before where Mets become Yankees and all of a sudden they get rejuvenated. Darryl Strawberry hit 24 home runs in 98, had some big hits for the 96 Yankees. You mentioned Doc Gooden, obviously. Doc Gooden pitches a no-hitter for the Yankees in 96, sort of rejuvenates his career, wins some big ball games for the Yankees. Even a part of that 2000 Yankee team where it looked like he was dead and buried for his career and had a second life. So I don't know what it is, Mr. Morosca. Former Mets become Yankees, and all of a sudden their careers become rejuvenated. I'll even give you Jose Vizcaíno was a good Yankee. He was another guy who was a former Met. I mean, there's a long list of former Mets who become Yankees, and they turn into different players and revitalize their careers. And it remains to be seen if Jay Bruce can do that. Listen, Jay Bruce isn't too far away from being removed of a player that for about 5 or 6 years was one of the most feared hitters in the National League. And that's what we were hoping for when he came to the Mets. And he showed you at times that player he could have been in the past, but unfortunately, for the most part, he was a big zero, especially in big spots. But another player that the Yankees are counting on here is Luis Severino. And for a worldwide audience here on Sportinarium, talk about what's going on with Luis Severino.
Well, he had Tommy John surgery and he was out. Well, some good news. He is recovering from it and he could pitch off the mound next week. So that's good news for the Yankees.
The Yankees are going to definitely need him here because if you think about it, Mr. Morosca, you lost James Paxton. You did make some moves in the offseason. You kind of remade your bullpen on the fly here. You did bring in some starting pitching. We'll see who is at the top of the rotation. But when it comes to a Severino, I mean, what are you expecting from him, especially considering how much time he's missed?
Well, you know what happens after Tommy John surgery. It could go either way. It doesn't always go good, but, it could go good. I mean, look what it did for Tommy John. So hopefully he pitches decently for the Yankees. He makes a good comeback, but we'll just have to wait and see. First, he has to pitch off the mound, of course, and we'll have to take it from there.
Absolutely, no question about it. And I have a feeling the Yankees are going to be relying a lot more on Severino because of the fact you lost Paxton, you lost Tanaka. But one sign for the Yankees, which I think so far you got to be happy about, and maybe he can revert to his old form of a few years ago, and that's Corey Kluber, who the Yankees signed in the offseason. And what's your thoughts thoughts on Corey Kluber so far in spring training?
So far, so good. Listen, if he could go back to what we're used to, the Yankees made a good move there. But, like anything else, it's spring training and we just have to wait and see. Anything could happen in spring training, with any of these players. Like we were just talking about Jay Bruce. Yeah, he could have a decent spring training, but who knows what's going to happen during the regular season. But, the Yankees have a couple of injuries here and they just need some of these guys to step up.
Corey Kluber is definitely a guy that the Yankees are going to be counting on. He's a guy, again, if you look at the back of his baseball card, this is a guy that's had some monster years before. He's been a Cy Young Award winner. I mean, you look at, he had a run for about 3 or 4 years where he was arguably the best pitcher in baseball, and he wins 18 games or more 4 out of 5 years. I mean, you think about that and put that into perspective. I mean, not many pitchers have had a run that Corey Kluber has had, and for his career, he's striking out more than a batter per inning. So the Yankees are going to definitely be counting on Corey Kluber big time, and especially considering we haven't seen much out of Corey Kluber the last couple of years. And we've talked about that quite a bit here on the show. And for our worldwide audience on Sportinarium, what are some other Yankees news and notes you've seen so far in spring training?
Well, some bad news for the Yankees. Relief pitcher Zach Britton is headed back to New York for elbow surgery after an MRI showed a bone chip in his left elbow. So he's going to miss a few months of the season. So that's not good news for the Yankees.
That's a significant loss for the Yankees because the Yankees had remade this bullpen, and he impacted the decisions the Yankees made in terms of the bullpen significantly, to say the least. So for the Yankee bullpen, I mean, what do you think the Yankees do now?
They can make another move. There's still some guys out there. Right now, I guess they're just going to wait and see what they have and what they have to do. This is a big blow to their plans, definitely. And he may miss 2 to 3 months because of this. I mean, maybe even longer.
Absolutely a significant loss, because here's a guy, while he's been much maligned in the past, in the postseason with the Orioles, obviously, but here's a guy in the past where you want to talk about being one of the best closers in baseball and still arguably one of the best setup men in baseball for the Yankees these past couple of years. And you look at a guy whose ERA is right around 2.5 the past several years, and he's led the American League in saves before. So this is a significant blow for the Yankees. And anything else when it comes to the Yankees that's caught your attention?
Well, there's some good news, actually, because Gary Sanchez has performed well in the early weeks of spring training, hitting 2 home runs and earning praise from the coaching staff for his efforts behind the plate. His defense this spring training has improved. So that is definitely something good for the Yankees. If Sanchez could come back, as we know what happened last season, if he could come back to his regular form, that's good news for the Yankees. And so far, he's looking good in spring training.
Well, the Yankees are going to definitely need him, Mr. Morosca, because, again, we talked about this quite a bit during the season. I mean, he was not even hitting 100 at one point. I mean, here's a guy that wound up hitting a little less than $150. I mean, think about that. There's very few baseball players that have hit that low in a season. We're talking about the likes of Rob Deere, Mark McGuire in 1991. Very few guys hit right around 150. And here's a guy 2 of the last 3 years that has hit under 200. So the Yankees are going to definitely hope that they have the Gary Sanchez, at least of 2019, where he did blast over 30 home runs. And he's shown you again, at times, he can be that guy that can come in and be one of the most prolific hitters in baseball, certainly from the catching position. And anything else when it comes to the Yankees?
That's about it. It's just that he's looking good so far this spring. The Yankees need him to come back, and hopefully he will. Hopefully he has a good season. We'll have to see, and we'll talk about him more during this season, I'm sure.
I think at one point when it came to the Yankee lineup, you were kind of hoping for Stanton, Judge, and Sanchez to kind of almost be that 3, 4, 5 murderers row type scenario. But unfortunately, Sanchez hasn't been able to put it together on a consistent basis. And quite frankly, Stanton and Judge haven't been able to stay consistently healthy. So in order for the Yankees to get back into the postseason, they're going to definitely need the 3 of them to stay healthy. And at least in the case of Sanchez, give you back those 2019 numbers. I think he and Pete Alonso were in some ways kind of in the same position. Obviously, Alonso had a little bit bit of a better season than Sanchez, and Alonso comes in, I think, with a little bit more praise and a little bit more hype from the fan base, whereas Sanchez, we didn't even know if he was going to come back to the Yankees. So there's a lot of decisions there. And then there's also some Yankee news, but it actually involves the past, Mr. Morosca, because apparently there's a Lou Gehrig Day. And for a worldwide audience here on Sportinarium, fill us in on the details.
Okay, it's going to be a new annual event to celebrate Iron Horse Lou Gehrig and raise funds in the battle against ALS. June 2nd will now be known as Lou Gehrig Day and will become a permanent place in the Major League Baseball calendar. It will not only honor and celebrate the legacy of the Hall of Fame first baseman, but there to raise awareness and funds to fight ALS, the awful disease that ended Gehrig's career and life. And actually, they named the disease Lou Gehrig's disease also. On Lou Gehrig Day, all players, managers, and coaches will wear a special uniform patch with a red 4, and it'll have ALS on it. The logo, of course, bearing Gehrig's retired uniform number. Wristbands will also be available to be worn in the game. Additional ceremonial details for each home park will be announced at a later date. So they're still going to come up with some other ceremonies and other events to go around with that day. And Gehrig joined Jackie Robinson and Roberto Clemente as the only players to have a day resolved in their name, in their honor. So the June 2nd day is significant in Gehrig's story because that was the day he replaced starter Wally Pipp, the Yankees' regular first baseman in 1925, because Wally Pipp had a headache. And that headache cost Wally Pipp his career. Could you imagine that? He didn't want to play that day because he had a headache. Gehrig started, and then that's it. Gehrig was in the lineup forever after that. It was just crazy, and also, sadly, the day he passed in 1941, 2 years after he was diagnosed with the disease, Gehrig also, he was only 36 years old when he was diagnosed with this disease. I mean, he played for so long, and he played for the record at the time, 2130 consecutive games played. Okay, that was a record until Cal Ripken Jr. in 1995 broke it.
I remember the day when Cal Ripken broke the streak that Lou Gehrig had. It was actually on a Wednesday. It was a Wednesday night baseball game that ESPN broadcasted. They actually had on then President Bill Clinton, and they had on a number of different people that were there, Commissioner Bud Selig, and there was so many people that were there and how important that was. When you think about the streak that Lou Gehrig had, I mean, this was arguably one of the streaks that nobody thought would be broken because it was over 2,100 consecutive games. That means that you couldn't take off, you couldn't be sick, you couldn't miss a game. You think about it now with COVID and everything else going on. I mean, listen, Lou Gehrig was the Iron Man. And then obviously Cal Ripken, he not only broke it, he shattered it. I mean, he wound up playing over 500 more games after he finally took himself out of the lineup in September of 1998. So obviously, Lou Gehrig, this day should have been long honored, long hailed. They should have done this 30, 40, 50 years ago because you think about Gehrig and Ruth and how important they are to the Yankees in all of baseball. So obviously, well overdue, and we look forward to celebrating that and talking of the latest happenings in the world of Major League Baseball with our longest tenured analyst, and that's our own Rob Morosca, as I am the host of the Sports Report, the Reverend Tom Bryson. For more information on the Sports Report, you can go to sportsreportx.com and listen to all of our archives with myself and Mr. Morosca. You can go to soundcloud.com/the Sports Report 2019. You can also now check us out on YouTube by subscribing to the Sports Report, the #1 global sports show, where you'll see sports report related content, including myself and Mr. Morosca, the Honorable MC Ernest Googs, Jake Guggenheimer, the Brute Force Brad Weiss, and various other sports report related content. And as always, a huge shout out to the entire team here at Sportinarium, including Lakey, Arv, Danny, Dale, Dave, Sean, Steve, Susie, Kasha, Connor, Martin, our new friend in addition to Sportinarium, Mike Lipinski, Addie, everybody at Sportinarium that has made us the #1 global sports show. And it's why also Sportinarium is the #1 global radio station. And of course, you can subscribe to the Sportinarium TV YouTube page at Sportinarium TV. You can follow Sportinarium on Twitter and Instagram at Sportinarium. You can like the Sportinarium Facebook page at Sportinarium Media. And most importantly, you can check out the Sports Report Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, 5 to 7 Eastern Time, 10 to 12 UK time. We make it simple. That's 5 to 7 Eastern Time, 10 to 12 UK time. You can catch the Sports Report on Sportinarium.com or also on now Sportinarium.com/player, where you can automatically be plugged into any show on Sportinarium anytime it streams, because of course we know Sportinarium is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year of content related to the many great shows here on Sportinarium. And we are so honored to be a part of Sportinarium, and we are so humbled by all the success that we've had here with the Sports Report. And I think in some ways, the Sports Report has built the Sportinarium fan base in the United States. So I think in some ways or another, Mr. Morosca, we are definitely responsible for all of the success that Sportinarium has made. And we have definitely made Sportinarium just as they've made us. And also want to give a huge shout out to the legendary Joe Dell, who we're going to hear some music from here shortly. And for all of your virtual keyboard and piano lessons, you can go to joe-dell.com. That's joe-dell.com and find out why he is the #1 keyboard and pianist around. And we're so excited to be playing his music each and every day on the show, Fridays to Sundays on Sportinarium.com. And last week, Mr. Morosca, we actually played over 30 minutes of Sleepy Hollow and Spectrum Green related content. So obviously cannot thank enough Joe Dell for giving us his music to share with the masses here on Sportinarium. And we are on the Sports Report, the #1 global sports show with our longest tenured analyst, Rob Morosca, talking all the latest happenings in the world of Major League Baseball. And Mr. Morosca, after talking about the Yankees and the various news and notes with the Yankees, I was curious for our worldwide audience on Sportinarium listening in what's going on with some of these different Met contract extensions.
Well, the Mets intend to begin extension talks with shortstop Francisco Lindor this week, kicking off what could be a busy end of the month, which is good. They plan to handle their extension candidates one at a time, meaning they will work on completing a Lindor deal before moving on to Michael Conforto and possibly Noah Syndergaard, which I think is a good idea. Let's work on one. Let's see if we can sign him and then go to Conforto and down the line. Experts expect Lindor to command a contract worth $300 million or more. Right now, he's going to make $22.3 million this year, and he, as we know, he could become a free agent after this season. So the Mets would have to definitely make a good deal, but they have some leverage because there's a lot of star shortstops who are going to be free agents after the season. Corey Seager, Travel Stone, Javier Baez. So there's also Carlos Correa, by the way. So there are going to be some shortstops available. So they have a little leeway, but listen, we'd love to see them get a deal done with him.
$300 million plus for Lindor. Is it worth it?
Yeah, definitely. Listen, what he's already brought to the team, and it's only spring training. You know, he just brings this excitement. He's always happy, like we were talking last week. He's happy to play. He's great in the clubhouse. And he's probably going to be the face of this franchise if they sign him for the long future. So, yeah, I think they should get a deal done with him. And, you know, even Sandy Alderson said the excitement that he brings to the team already is amazing. So I think they're looking to sign him.
You brought up Noah Syndergaard, and I want to go to Noah Syndergaard first before I go on Michael Conforto, because Noah Syndergaard has been a very polarizing figure, and we've talked a lot about him over the past 2 years that we've been on the air. Noah Syndergaard, the back of his baseball card, it's a mixed bag. For the hype that he's been given, I don't quite know if he's lived up to those expectations, but I wouldn't quite label him a bust either. I mean, Noah Syndergaard, in your opinion, would you re-sign him?
Well, I would re-sign him, but, you know, on Noah Syndergaard, I would wait before an extension. Of course, you know, he's coming back from serious injury. So let's see how he does before we extend his contract. I think that's the one player that they could wait on a little. You know, let's see how he comes back from this injury. Like you said, the back of his baseball card, you know, it's not bad. It's not great. He is a polarized player. You know, he is opinionated. So we have to see how he comes back from this injury. So I would hope that the Mets would wait a little while before making an extension of his contract.
Yeah, I mean, again, his numbers as a Met, I would say they've been decent. They obviously have not been in Matt Harvey territory the last couple of years, but I think we probably would have hoped for more from Noah Syndergaard. I think the other thing has been his ability to be healthy. He hasn't just not been very healthy at all. He's had an inability to stay healthy as a Met so far. So he's a question mark. But the big one to me, Mr. Morosca, is Michael Conforto. I think of the three players that you mentioned, I got to think Michael Conforto is the most important to get done and re-sign.
And I agree with you. The Mets have to sign Comfort. They have to extend his contract. They have to do whatever it takes. You're right. Homegrown, that's a no-brainer as far as I'm concerned.
Do you expect the Mets to sign Michael Conforto before the season? I would be very shocked if they did it before the start of the season, but before the season is out here, do you expect Michael Conforto to re-sign? Or, Mr. Morosca, if you are Michael Conforto, do you want to wait a bit? I mean, do you want to test free agent? Because if you look at Michael Conforto in the back of his baseball card, I mean, here's a guy the past 3 or 4 years, he's been pretty consistent now. I mean, I had made the comparison at one point on the show in the past couple of years that he reminded me of a little bit better version of Kevin McReynolds, where you could count on him for 25 to 30 home runs, close to 100 RBIs, maybe hit around 270. Obviously, last year he had a little bit better than that, but he's been a very consistent player for the Mets now for the past 3 or 4 years. I mean, if you're Conforto, Mr. Morosca, what do you do?
That's a good question. I mean, does he want to wait and see? Does he want to test free agency? Here's the thing, though. Right now, I think players want to be on the Mets. I think they're excited about new ownership. I think they're excited about what's going on with the team. And I think they want to win a World Series with this team. So that's very tricky. That's a tricky question. I mean, I think if the Mets offer him a decent, more than a decent, a good contract, I think he will re-sign with the Mets. But we'll have to wait and see with that too. You know, we don't know what he's thinking. But right now, it's a good time to be a New York Met.
No question that it's a good time to be a New York Met, and we're certainly eagerly anticipating the start of the season. But before we get your closing thoughts, is there anything else Mets related our worldwide audience here in Sportinarium should keep an eye on?
Or I hope the Mets do re-sign him. Extend his contract. I'm sorry, because I don't want to see him go to free agency. You know, it was a big blockbuster trade. And you know what? I think he does bring excitement. I like what I've seen so far in spring training. He's great in the clubhouse. The players love him. So I think it would be a good thing for the Mets to extend his contract and not let him become a free agent after this year. That's my opinion. That's what I think. And hopefully the Mets get a deal done. And both sides would like to get it done before opening day.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, Mr. Morosca. If the first month of the season, Lindor is hitting 220 with 2 home runs and 12 RBIs, and he's come up in 8 or 9 different spots and runners in scoring position, and he strikes out or doesn't knock him in or grounds into a double play, Met fans are going to turn on him real quick. So everybody's saying the right things, and Lindor is bringing a lot of excitement. But if he gets off to a slow start, this is a tough town. This is as tough a place to start off and have a slow start as anywhere you're going to play. And maybe Philadelphia would be another example. Maybe Boston would be the other example that comes to mind. But I sure hope that Lindor gets off to a great start. The Mets get off to a great start. And we can talk about a lot of good things in the upcoming 2021 season. But we'll definitely cover all of the latest happenings with you when it comes to the world of Major League Baseball, alongside the Honorable MC Ernest Stubb, the Brute Force Brad Weiss, and also Jake Guggenheimer, who also was a decorated college baseball player, and the legendary Craig Holman. We'll talk a lot about, I am sure, all the latest happenings in the world of Major League Baseball. And for you, my friend, I want to give you the floor. I want to give you any closing thoughts. As always, plug where our listeners can get in touch with you. I cannot thank you enough for all that you do for us, as you're an integral reason as to why we're the number one global sports show. So you know the drill, my friend. Plug where listeners get in touch with you, and the floor is yours.
Okay, I just want to say one quick thing about Lindor. I agree with you. If he gets off to a slow start, we know there will be boos from the 10% 10% of the fans that are allowed into the ballpark for the beginning of the season. But you got to remember one thing. Remember Mike Piazza. Fans booed him because they didn't think he was doing enough his first year as a Met. And then we know what happened. The fans fell in love with him. He fell in love with New York, had a Hall of Fame career, and is wearing a Mets cap in Cooperstown. So, anything could happen. But hopefully he gets off to a really good start. And of course, once again, people could reach me at R. Morosca on Twitter. I'm getting a lot of followers. I'm getting a lot of followers from the UK, which I like. I'm psyched about that. And like I always said, follow me and I will follow you.
Amen to that. And a rising tide lifts all boats. And we know that Sportinarium, Rob Morosca, and the entire team here on the Sports Report will be that rising tide that is going to lift us. And looking forward to the start of the season. And we're certainly hoping that Mr. Lindor, Mr. Conforto, Mr. Syndergaard will be that rising tide that'll lift our New York Mets. And we'll certainly see what happens when it comes to the Yankees. My friend, can't thank you enough. Looking forward to speaking with you next week.
Talk to you next week.
As we're here on the Sports Report, the #1 global sports show with our longest tenured analyst, and that's our own Rob Morosca, as I am the host of the Sports Report, the Reverend Tom Bryce, and stay tuned for some hard-hitting music from the legendary Joe Dell, of course, the #1 virtual keyboard and pianist from his legendary Sleepy Hollow band. So stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen, because you are going to be in for a treat here when it comes to the legendary Joe Dell and Sleepy Hollow, as we are here on the Sports Report, the #1 global sports show on Sportinarium, the #1 global radio station, the radio station that the Sports Report built. So stay tuned for the brand new Joe Dell song as we're here on Sportinarium, the #1 global radio station. Stay tuned for some brand new Joe Dell music.